Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in today's video, we're going to take a look at the Aqua West Coast Bivy. This West Coast Bivy is a shelter system that in combination with this bivy and also the Guide Series large tarp makes up the West Coast combo. Now today we're not going to look at the tarp itself. If you're interested in seeing more about that Guide Series large tarp, take a look at one of my prior videos. But what we are going to do is go into the setup of this West Coast Bivy, and then I'll take this out into the field where I'll be using it in an upcoming backpacking trip as my shelter. Now the reason why we're out here first is I tend to like setting up my shelter in a controlled environment before I take it out into the field. The main reason being really a couple of different factors. Number one is that there could potentially be a manufacturing defect. So for example, if there's a problem with either the shelter or even the poles or something went a little bit wrong in manufacturing, I want to pick that up before I get out there. And the other thing is sometimes setup can be tricky. Now I think this will be pretty straightforward. However, there could be some little tips or tricks or things that I want to identify first before I get out there so I can adapt before I hit the field. And if you're interested in seeing exactly what I'm talking about, do me a favor, stay tuned. So again, taking into consideration the fact that this West Coast Bivy is part of the larger system being the West Coast combo. And as I mentioned, we're not really going to look at the tarp today, but I did want to get into a little bit of detail on this bivy just to make sure that when I get out into the field on my backpacking trip, I know exactly what I'm going to do to set this up. Now for this purpose, I do actually have myself a little ground sheet, so I figured this would be the first thing I'm looking to use. Now this does not come with this system. This actually isn't even an Aqua product, but for me, I do like to have, sort of call it a sacrificial ground sheet beneath either my tent or in this case this bivy system, because for a couple of main reasons. One, I want just a little extra fabric beneath it for the durability, but two, a lot of times where I'm going in the woods or in the mountains, there is like pine sap and different things on the ground that really could get all over my shelter system, and I'd rather have a sacrificial ground sheet than to really kind of trash my shelter system. So in that case, I'm pretty much just going to spread this out the way I would if I got out into the field. Now the West Coast Bivy does come with some pegs, so I'm just going to use the pegs that this comes with to get me started here, and if I need some more, I will go and get them, but I'm just going to get this ground sheet nice and tight. Now even though these pegs aren't the lightest weight pegs, they're actually reasonably light aluminum. They actually feel pretty good. I like how sort of sturdy they feel and how easy they are to kind of penetrate the ground. And actually for this purpose, they're almost the perfect shape. So I think these should work pretty well. Now I have a number of different designs of pegs and different reasons to bring different ones, but for this particular case, I'm going to try to use the factory pegs that the West Coast Bivy does come with. Now the whole purpose of this video is the fact that I've never set this up before, so I'm going to do my best to try to get this oriented the right way. Could go one of a number of ways, and I'm pretty much just going to get this thing spread out to kind of start to get a look at it. Now I could be completely mistaken, but I think I have this reasonably oriented the right direction, and I'm just going to use these to kind of stake down the corners of this and kind of get it spread out. Now a couple of things, and the reason why I said I like to set these things up in a controlled environment. As I mentioned, I am trying to use a sacrificial ground sheet. Well, if that's the case, is the ground sheet the right shape, right size? Will it fit underneath this and be able to be spread out and give me full coverage? Is it too wide even? Sometimes the ground sheet might be too big. So these are the types of things I'm really trying to figure out right now. Now at an initial glimpse, it does look like the bivy is just slightly longer than the ground sheet. So what I might pay attention to is what side my head will eventually be on. And when that's the case, I think I would opt to have sort of more of my head on the ground sheet than my feet. So even though the bivy is longer than the ground sheet, I'll just pay close attention to that when I set it up to make sure I have a little more coverage on my head end. So now just taking out the poles, this would be a good chance just to make sure there's nothing damaged and that the poles are in good shape. Nothing's bent or cracked. All the ends fit together well. No strange manufacturing defects. Now, right away, I can tell you that the poles are bent. I'm assuming that's factory, but just being a little wise ass. So, getting these put together, really for the first time here, I can kind of see that you end up with reasonably, call it like a hoop shape over the top. And I'm gonna kind of have to figure out how this works, but you'll see here, kind of makes a general overall hoop shape. Okay, so here you see I was trying to set this up, just going right at it and taking the poles and just getting going right away. Now naturally I didn't read the instructions, typical guy. Actually there's no instructions with this anyway. But let's just say for example it was like kind of rainy out. Now I have my tarp over top and I'm trying to get this set up. I'm already making mistakes in my setup. This does not necessarily utilize all the clips around the top. There is a sleeve, so you have to route the poles through the sleeve before you clip it into place. And that's something I'm already doing wrong. So now you'll see I have the bivy set up. All things considered, very straightforward, nothing difficult about it. And you'll see that it is pretty much a nice length for the actual ground sheet I have beneath it. Now just as I mentioned, I kind of have to figure out what my head end will be. And I think for me it would probably be the mesh end. You know, one of the things about a sort of shelter like this is the fact that you really get the advantage of enjoying the outdoor experience and feeling like you're outdoors, kind of a little less material around you, which is nice. And so I will probably take advantage of that fact and keep my head down this end. So in that regard, where I have most of it sort of on top of that ground sheet, it's doing exactly what I had hoped to do. Now for this example, I'm just going around everywhere, doing a real quick look and check of all the seams, making sure nothing looks like it's out of place, because the last thing I want to do is find something that's going to be a structural issue for me or would potentially prevent me from, in theory, really using this out in the field. Now, just in an initial glimpse, there's nothing that looks to be glaring, nothing really sticking out. And so at that point, I'd say I'm feeling pretty confident that this would work for me. Setup is quite easy and very fast. I mean, I could literally set this entire thing up in, probably 2 minutes without filming, maybe even less. So that is a great sign, and I very much like that about this shelter. Very simple and reasonably easy, all things considered. Now, just making some quick observations, there is only one door, so depending on my setup, I may want to consider which direction I set this up. And then there is also this kind of protected side, so if there was just a little bit of wind that I wanted to kind of get this sort of leaning into the, call it a prevailing wind direction, and sort of cut down on the breeze, or if I really wanted to orient this way, you'll see here there is no door. So, you know, depending on really what I want to do, those are just little observations that now I can take into consideration walking right into my camp, and I don't need to really start setting this up and then figure it out the hard way. Now, continuing on with my basic inspection, just making sure that all these zippers do function well and they don't really get snagged and they don't have a big split in them. You know, it is July right now for me, and where I'm going into the mountains, I know it's going to be buggy. So the last thing I want to do is find out I have a big split in my zipper and I find out that I have myself a rough night. But overall, checking all the seams, checking the zipper, the pulls, and everything that I need to set this up properly. At this point, it looks like I'm in very good shape. Now, the other thing worth noting is that the pack of stakes that I had actually came with 10, which is pretty cool. So I have enough for the ground sheet with me, I have enough for the actual bivy itself, and a couple extras in case I want to kind of stake out the ends, so I can kind of stake down the side of the poles here and really get that loop tied to the ground. So overall, this shelter will be nice and tight and tidy, and looks to me like it's going to make for a wonderful night. Now, with that said, it's getting late and I have some packing to do. So the next time you see this, we'll be out on the trails. Gonna get set up here in this area, nice and flat. Looks like it should work pretty well for the net tent. I have myself a little bit deeper in the trees to try to cut down on the wind just a bit. And then there's nothing overhead that appears as though it would either get wind blown or potentially snap off. So this is a very nice little site. And now I got to get set up. So got a little bit of work to do here. Now, I found as though the practice made perfect. Getting out into the camping application, my setup went exactly as planned. Basically, because I had done a little bit of work up ahead of time, my setup was a snap. A little bit crazy, but this is home. Not bad. A little large on the tarp here, actually quite large on the tarp, and I had a ton of extra material. So the extra material here is definitely tough to work with, but anyway, at least I have this set up. So I'm gonna get my stuff in here and get the rest of everything set up. So we just finished eating and we're gonna get really settled into a night of hanging out. And here you'll see my sleeping arrangement. So I am inside the Aqua West Coast Bivy with the Guide Series large tarp over the top, which in combination makes this, as I have mentioned, the West Coast combo. Now, really the problem I'm having, as I mentioned too before, is that this tarp was very large for the given space I have to set it up. The trees are tight, there's a lot of deadfall here, and to set this up I had to be a little bit funky with it. But it's doing what it needs to do. It's kind of keeping the wind off me, but you'll see I vented it really on that side, and then this side I'm going to leave completely open, so I'm going to get a nice sort of easy crosswind through here, but it's not going to be overbearing tonight. So anyway, and then I have my it's the Inertia Ozone sleeping pad, and then I have a Sierra Designs down pillow, and then the 2Go Systems shift quilt. So this is my system tonight. I'm very much looking forward to this. I think I should be comfortable in the 2Go Systems quilt, but it is going to get cool. The temperature will definitely drop off. But thinking probably to the 40s. So this is going to be a perfect test for the shift quilt. I think this is really, to me, sort of the, I don't know, I'm hoping optimum temperature for this. Really to have a good night's sleep and not get too cold. So this is going to be a great test for this tonight. So between that and you know, kind of enjoying this AquaQuest product, I very much enjoy the AquaQuest products that I've been using, and I'm hoping this will be exactly the same. So anyway, even though my setup is just a touch on the funny side, I'm pretty excited about how this is going to be to stay in here tonight. Now the shelter is pretty sweet. I have tons of headroom. I mean, this thing is actually pretty big. I actually feel as though I could sleep in here, probably with my son. I don't know if it would be all that comfortable with a second adult, but with my kid, I'd probably be fine. And I like this. I think it's a good, viable option. I like the interesting geometry I'm getting out of the tarp, even though
It's kind of big for the space. It's actually working pretty good, and I think I'm gonna have a great night's sleep. So alright guys, till the morning.
Now overall, I found that my experience in this West Coast Bivy was excellent. I liked it a lot. I think this has a slightly different shape than some of the other net tents that I've used in the past, and it's actually working to the advantage. I found as though in combination with the Guide Series large tarp, I had an ample amount of room for not only myself in the bivy itself, but underneath the tarp, it was actually like a huge vestibule area. So I would, if I needed to, have the ability to really get a ton of gear in there. Let's just say I had other people I was with and they didn't have an appropriate vestibule, or if it was really harsh and rainy conditions, I would have been in excellent shape. Now, even though that particular location was a little bit tough for the tarp that I brought, it was a little awkward in the configuration where I was very confined between the trees, I was able to make it work. I mean, that's the nice thing about a tarp, is generally you get a lot of different lashing and tie-out options, so if you're a little bit familiar with it and kind of creative, you can definitely make it work. Now, I was fortunate where I thought ahead, and I knew I might come into a little bit of a situation, so I brought extra stakes and tie-outs with me. In a pinch, if I had to, I certainly could have carved myself out some additional stakes, but overall I found as though I was prepared. I kind of knew what I was getting into, so a little bit of reconnaissance and thought up front definitely paid off. Now, the West Coast Bivy did have ample headroom, nice overall width, but more important for me, where I'm 6'1", having enough length. I had a good amount of room at both my feet and at my head. When I'm talking about a slightly different shape on these other net tents, sometimes they're a little bit, call it more towards the square side versus a long rectangle. I do personally like that long rectangle, and not only that, the good amount of headroom directly above where you're gonna sit up. It worked out very well and was an excellent night's sleep. Now, one thing I did find is though, where I had one side of the tarp completely open, that was the side the sun came up, so in the morning it was extremely bright. But you know what? That's kind of the experience you're looking for with the net tent. You kind of want to feel like you're more on the outside, more overall just in the woods or in the mountains and kind of taking in the atmosphere, and that is the experience that you get. So I very much enjoyed it. No moisture on me, good solid little cross ventilation. I was plenty warm with my sleep system. In fact, maybe a little bit too warm, but that was my own personal fault. I got good ventilation, no moisture, nice little breeze, and I had myself a very nice, comfortable sleep. Now, I also found as though this packed up very well. It fit beautifully in my bag, and it just packed in very well. No awkwardness. It worked out great. I basically kept my poles on the outside of the bag, and it worked out just fine. Everything else packed up nicely on the inside of the bag. Fit good and square, filled the volume very efficiently, and that's what you're kind of looking for with a system like this. Now, the overall quality that you get with all Aqua Quest products is very high. I very much enjoy their products. They do an excellent job. They think about their gear and how it's going to be used, and I can say that I have definitely become a huge fan of Aqua Quest products. So before I go away, I'd like to say thank you very much again to the people at Aqua Quest for providing these products for review. I very much enjoy them. They have been excellent. And overall, good quality, nicely created, definitely good thought process, and something that I definitely enjoy. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.